Hello guys, Greg back with another video on the channel that is all killer no filler. So the more that I delve into this hobby of perfumery, the more I find myself drawn to the older fragrances, old classics, and in particular French classics. And I think it's the way that those perfumes were crafted. I just can't find anything out there today that's made in the same way as these. And if you think about most things in life, you think about sport or technology or anything really, things tend to improve over time. I think perfume is one of those rare areas where things were actually better 50 years, maybe even 100 years ago than they are today. So what we're going to do today is talk about 5 of my favourite old school discontinued French perfumes for men. This one obviously is about 100 years old, so this doesn't feature, this is just here for illustration at the moment, but it is a great fragrance. So the ones I'm going to talk about, they span the 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s. None of them are ones that really get talked about very much. They're all, as I said before, discontinued. They are hard to find, but I managed to find them, so they are out there if you're patient and you look around and you do want to try and get any of these. So let's start off with the 1960s. And this one is an amazing Chypre, and it's from the house of Rocher, and this one is called Monsur Rocher. I thought I'd leave these all in the boxes to begin with so you can see the full presentation. We'll get this out, but this is a really great masculine floral. There's the bottle, and on first spray of this one, it's quite a pungent blast of lavender you get, and also clary sage, and the clary sage in here comes off green but also a little bit leathery as well. And I also get kind of like a green apple note right at the top of this one. But it's quite an in-your-face fragrance right from the very first spray. When I was looking into fragrances to feature in this video, and I did my usual thing where I get them out and I test them and I try and break them down, I didn't realise how much of a key note and how much of a note I love carnation is. I've never really sort of thought about it, but it's very prominent in 3 of these 5 fragrances on the list. So that was quite interesting to me. But carnation can come off very differently in a perfume depending on what it's blended with. And in the case of Monsur Rocher, it's actually very similar to clove, but it's just slightly less abrasive. But it really is a key part to the magic of this one. And if I was trying to break this one down in a few words, I'd say it's a green, mossy, smoky, herbal fragrance. It's a floral Chypre, and it's got elements of a barbershop fougere as well. But this one was created by perfumer Jacques Bogart. And interestingly, he actually created Equipage for Hermes, and there's very distinct similarity between these two. And the strange thing is that Equipage actually came out literally a couple of months after Jacques Bogart had created this for Rocher, so I'm guessing Rocher probably weren't that happy about that. But that's the first one anyway, Monsur Rocher. So on to the next one, from the 1970s. Another fantastic Chypre, and another one called Monsur. But this time it's from the house of Carven, or Carven, or Carven, however you want to pronounce it. I say Carven. And this is a proper masculine 70s Chypre. Some may even say it's a fougere. But it's a true example of how to use florals in a masculine scent. And much like Monsur Rocher, this is loaded up with cinnamon and carnation. It's got a little bit of funk in here coming from civet, but it's not that sort of 80s use of civet, really, that you get in a lot of the 80s men fragrances. It's not as big and bold as that. It's more like a component of the fragrance rather than being front and centre. You get a big dose of jasmine in here, and the base is myrrh and vanilla. You also get a little hint of leather, and it just finishes this one off perfectly. But again, a superb creation in my opinion. So now we're going to move on to the 80s, and this one was the first foray into the world of men's fragrances for the house of Cartier. And it's still the best men's fragrance from that house in my opinion. And this one bears the name of a famous aviator called Santos Dumont. And he's also got several Cartier watches named in his honour as well. And this one is called Sentus Cartier. And this was released in 1981, and that was a hell of a year for the big masculines because Curos and also Chanel Antaeus came out in 1981. But Santos holds its own with any of those fragrances in my opinion. It's not such a kind of hairy chest fragrances as those that I mentioned. It's actually a little bit more subdued than those, but not in a bad way. It's definitely not lacking in performance. It's got elements of a barbershop fragrance. It's got fresh lavender as the dominant part of the early stages. It develops into a woody, spicy fragrance. It's got beautiful nutmeg and pepper notes in here, and it dries down with some sandalwood and vanilla, and it actually becomes quite a powdery fragrance in the base. You know, not really doing this one justice with what I've said, you know, but if you get a chance to get your nose on an older bottle, you know, you really should. This is the only one on the list where you can still get a version of this fragrance, but it is vastly different to this one here, and this bottle doesn't stand up, so to be safe and not risk breaking it, I'm just going to lie that down there. Right, so next we're going to move on to the 90s. We've got two fragrances from the 90s, and the first one, I've literally never heard anyone talk about this. It's from the house of Jacques Bogart. This one is called Witness. We'll get this one out of the box while I ramble about it, but Witness came out in 1992, and it's definitely a 90s style fragrance. It's let's just show you the presentation of the bottle. Very nice. But it's the dominant note in this fragrance is cinnamon. It's a green piney fragrance, but it's got this overriding feeling of like warm and cosy, like winter spices. I say it's almost like a glass of mulled wine, but without the booziness. There's some masculine florals in here, oak moss, nice sandalwood, and as with Monsur Rocher and Monsur Carvin, there's a big dose of carnation in this one. In the case of this fragrance, that carnation actually is slightly different. I'm guessing here, but I get from this fragrance a particular floral that's like a tangy spiciness, and that's what I interpret as carnation, because there's nothing else in this fragrance that I can see that I'm getting that from. But this one might overtake Burberry London as my Christmas Day scent next Christmas. I've wore Burberry London, I think, for 10 years in a row on Christmas Day. But this one has got that cosy, warming feel. I can't really say enough about this one. If this one was released by like a fashionable niche house today, everyone would be screaming about it. But unfortunately, like the others on this list, it's quite hard to find now. Let's move these along. So the final one. Since we're talking about French perfumes, we had to have a Guerlain in here. And this one is very rarely talked about. And this one is called Coriolan. It's not one of my absolute favourite Guerlain fragrances. And if this list that we're talking about now is in order of preference, this would be at number 5. But that's not to say that it's not an excellent composition. It really is a superb fragrance. As I get this one out of the box, there is a fragrance in the exclusive line of Guerlain fragrances now, and it's called L'Homme d'un Eros, or Ero, and that's based on Coriolan. And there's a presentation, quite a distinctive bottle. But the one that I mentioned, L'Homme d'un Eros, it's a really expensive fragrance in the exclusive line, whereas this one was just part of the regular designer line when it came out. And I read that that this fragrance was being worked on by Jean-Paul Guerlain, and it actually was sort of partially finished, and it was going to be a sequel to Derby, but they ditched this one, or set it to one side, and created Heritage instead. But years and years later, Jacques Guerlain revisited this one and completed it and renamed it, or released it under the name of Coriolan. And to me, this one's got elements of a chypre and also elements of a fougere. It's a very aromatic, woody fragrance. It's centred around oak moss and vetiver. The top of this is a very herbal lemon, and it develops into that classy, regal-smelling oak moss and vetiver. And then the dry down is a beautiful leather and patchouli with a little hint of vanilla. But anyone that likes that sort of genre of the early fougères or sort of 80s, 90s fougères and chypre should really try this one. So there you go, guys. That's 5 of my favourite French old school discontinued perfumes. Please leave a comment, let me know some of yours, and leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. If you're not subscribed to my channel, please do. And if you're on Instagram, please give us a follow. My user on there is Fragrance Samples UK. Thanks again for watching, guys. See you all soon with another video. Cheers.